Governor Cuomo's scandals continue to grow in scope and intensity. How this is going to end, I don't even know. Welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. A lot of people have been seeing more and more of the information coming out on Governor Cuomo and these multiple scandals, which are currently focused primarily on the sexual harassment and sexual assault allegations being leveled against him. The interesting thing is, how did we get here? So, like I said, I don't know where this is going to end, but let's talk about how we got here. So, begin with the nursing home scandal, which should be which should be receiving much more coverage than it is. But as I saw somebody talking about it, I think it was this morning, they were talking about how the current zeitgeist, media zeitgeist, is much more driven by and responsive to the Me Too movement. And yeah, definitely these allegations need to be taken seriously and need to be dealt with. But the nursing home scandal of not just the actions of what he did of sending people who were COVID positive. So during the midst of the COVID crisis, he's sending people who were testing positive with COVID-19. He was sending them into nursing homes. So he was sending people who had the disease into the places filled with the people most vulnerable to the disease. And I'm laughing not because it's funny. I'm laughing at the absurdity that this dude was held up as the chosen one. Like, it's insane. So while he's sending COVID positive patients into the worst possible place you could send them, clearly putting nursing home residents at enormous risk, people were dying at increasing numbers. And he saw this and decided, oh, this doesn't look good. At this point, the media is loving him. They're fawning all over him. And he's like, this doesn't look good. Yeah, let me fudge the numbers. So Cuomo's administration decides to change the numbers and to try to cover up the effect of his incompetence and stupidity. And this is how this starts to come out. I believe it was first when Letitia James, in fact, no, it was even before, because people were saying, hey, wait, what are the numbers? People were asking. And so ultimately, Letitia James in December of 2020 decides she conducts she's the AG of New York, and she conducts the investigation and she publishes a report. Hey, yeah, the Cuomo administration was lying about these numbers. And then his right hand aide, she then tells in a call with New York State Democrats, tells them, yeah, we lied about the numbers, and we know we kind of put you in a tight spot, but hey, don't worry, we were just trying to save face. We didn't want Trump to use this against us. And at that time, like they're texting each other, like, wait, did she just admit that? Like, did she really just, like, am I hearing things? Yeah, she admitted that. So it comes out and everybody's like, what the hell? And so one of the early persons who went real hard at him was a New York State legislator, Ron Kim. And, well, before we get into that, so we've got the nursing home scandal. Then, this comes out, this information comes out where it's confirmed that the Cuomo administration lied. They did some dumb stuff already in sending COVID positive patients to the nursing homes. Then they lied to cover up the numbers to make themselves look less bad. Oh yeah, by the way, did you know that he came out with a book? Then they get caught. They cover it up. They get caught in the cover up. Well, they admit to the cover up. And the brazenness that it takes to just say, oh yeah, we're covering it up. And then in fact, that's not even the right order, because the original sexual harassment claim came in December. So that young woman, Lindsay Boylan, came out and said she's running for Manhattan borough president. And she says, hey, You know, I had to deal with pervasive sexual harassment from Governor Cuomo, and yeah, I'm not trying to talk to the media about this. But after doing that, suddenly some stories about her are leaked to the press, and personnel memos are leaked to the press. Silence ensues. Now more women are coming out. More women said yes, and it's getting worse because now you have a woman who is unidentified who's saying that he actually sexually assaulted her. The most interesting thing is, let's take a look at how he was covered over the past year. Because how did we get a point where now, like, the dominoes are falling? But if you just take a look at the past year, over the past year, he was being hailed as the second, as the first, yeah, the second coming or the first coming of presidential behavior, of political excellence, and like they were fawning all over him. It's amazing. It really is amazing because I remember this is towards the beginning of the COVID crisis. I'm talking to my mom on the phone who doesn't live in New York State, and she says, "Yeah, oh, Trump just he's horrible. Watching him on these press conferences, it's just ridiculous." But Cuomo's so nice. He has it's so, it's such a contrast. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, you're Governor Cuomo. Yeah, he really has everything on the ball. It must be really reassuring. And I'm like, Mom, have you looked at the numbers? She's like, what? I'm like, New York has the worst numbers in the country, the highest deaths in the country. New York is in the worst shape in the country. Yet, my mother, who was watching the news, was being given, and she wasn't the only one, because all over the place, people were like, wow, he's so great, he's so awesome. People believe that Governor Andrew Cuomo was doing a great job. And that's how the media spun it. Which just goes to show you the not just the will of the media, but the power and effectiveness of the media to completely shape false narratives. So we're dealing with a man who, despite doing some monumentally stupid things and presiding over one of the worst handlings of the COVID crisis in the nation, decided that I think this came out in October or September, but he decided he was going to write a book about how good a job he did during the COVID-19 pandemic. And people were loving it. They were eating it up. As of now, he's still not coming clean with how much money he got for this book. Any money, any amount of money is too much. But just the fact that Andrew Cuomo did a mission accomplished in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. If you don't know what the mission accomplished is, that's when George Bush, flew in on a fighter on the carrier, he was wearing a jumpsuit, said mission accomplished in the Iraq war, and then a bunch of people died. That's what Andrew Cuomo did with his leadership lessons book. But it's worse than that, because if you just let's talk about his coverage, and it isn't just a government scandal; it's a media scandal, because now we're getting to see why people were praising this guy as the hero of the pandemic, like the hero who has the most deaths on his hands of any governor in the state, in the country. And people were trying to blame Trump. Like, seriously, people were blaming Trump for the death count, despite the fact that state governors were in control. So this is, like I said, that's media. Media is pretending that the federal government was responsible for everything happening. Now, the federal government could have done things to help. PPE. And in fact, the federal government can still do things, and it's not doing it. Trump didn't do it. Biden's not doing it. We still don't have widespread access to N95 masks. They still have people running around here with fashion accessories, and now Biden has decided to using the media to convince people to run around with 2 or 3 fashion accessories on their face instead of actual personal protective equipment. This is the power of the media. The media spun this dude into being the hero, the valiant, courageous Andrew Cuomo, and it's absurd considering all of the, not just the dumb stuff he did, but the fact just looking at the numbers made it clear that this guy was horrible. But like they said, he was, they were constantly putting him on TV. His brother was hosting, was interviewing him, and it was so fun to see brothers jabbing each other and the sibling, playfulness between each other. And oh yeah, mom says you missed too many dinners. You better show up on Sunday for Sunday dinner. Like, it was just, it was so amazing, and it made everybody feel warm and fuzzy inside, except people who were actually dying and people who were losing loved ones who were here in New York, who knew that this was complete and utter nonsense. Actually, there were people in New York who still believed the nonsense, but there were plenty of people who were directly affected who realized, no, this is absurd, absolutely absurd. And if you just take a look at the maps, the early maps of the highest concentrations, where that coincided to the the path of the MTA, from between path and New York City subways, like that. Those were the highest concentrations of deaths. So if the MTA, which I'm going to be doing a separate video about that, the MTA's its role in the coronavirus, in the COVID-19 crisis. But if you just take a look at it, like Cuomo being in charge of the MTA, like his mismanagement, not just during the crisis, but before the crisis, was responsible for so much mayhem. But the media told a story. They created a narrative, and they sold it. And people who aren't on the ground and people who just watch the news were deluded and deceived into believing that Andrew Cuomo was somehow a hero throughout all of this. Yeah. Like she says, Solicitor glossed over other numbers. New York had the most overall COVID deaths of any state, a number only recently surpassed by California, which has nearly doubled the population. But meanwhile, they were saying Cuomo great, DeSantis bad. Highest death toll in the country, but he was the hero of the story. It wasn't just CNN, MSNBC. So on MSNBC in May, ever so gently asked about the nursing home death count and let the governor ramble on how his biggest flaw is doing too much. No follow-up questions. No follow-up questions. Softballs, and you do whatever you want to do. No follow-up questions. Good Morning America. Homecoming king of this crisis. This is what the media did. Like, this is a lesson, not just about Cuomo. Because after this is over, whether he's impeached, whether he resigns, I don't know how that's going to end. But this is a lesson. Stop believing the media. They're not journalists. They're propagandists. They're experts at creating stories, creating narratives, and then selling lies to you in a format that just fits so neatly and makes you feel however they need you to feel in that moment. Oh yeah, when he was on Good Morning America, he did not receive any questions about the nursing home deaths. And this was before his book was released in October, which became an instant bestseller. Think about that. This man presided over the highest death toll in the country. Wrote a book while the crisis is still going on, and sold copies to be a bestseller while the crisis is still going on. So in October, Sonny Hostin did mention the nursing home controversy, but let him deny he ever sent a directive, and then they went back to discussing his love life. Janice Dean. So now Janice Dean was going in, and quite frankly, as you can see, she's pissed. Like, she has a reason to. Both of her in-laws were in nursing home and died. And so they said she suffered abuse from the Cuomo administration. And said she's not a credible source on anything except maybe the weather. the condescension. Like, like this is who Cuomo is, but this is what the media covered for. And it's so I mean, but that these are part of the interesting things to take a look at. How the how the media became cheerleaders, became writers, fiction writers, because they wrote a fiction and they sold the fiction. But if we fast forward to what's happening recently, when the nursing home scandal broke and Cuomo was exposed, let's talk about Ron Kim. So Ron Kim, New York State legislator, said, "Hey, this is ridiculous. He covered this up. He needs to be held accountable. Something needs to be done." When he was being outspoken in his criticism of the governor, he says, "Hey, I got a phone call and they threatened me. They said, listen, like you better tone it down." In fact, I think that they told him what to tell the press to make Cuomo look good, and if he didn't, they had the power to destroy him. Cuomo's team comes out and denies that they threatened him, and then Cuomo begins to actually start trying to tarnish him and saying, Mr. Cuomo also accused the assemblyman of a continuing racket soliciting donations from nail salon owners. So he claimed Cuomo threatened him. Cuomo says, "Oh no, I didn't threaten to destroy him," and then Cuomo starts to try to destroy him. Like, this dude, like, this is who you're dealing with. Just a thug. But if you watched how he operates, you'd know this, because the media has long been in his pocket. I remember in 2018 where the media wouldn't even cover a debate unless he gave the okay. They was like, "We're not going to cover it because the League of Women Voters held a debate." Now, mind you, none of the other the mainstream media refused to cover a debate or even hold a debate until Cuomo gave the okay, and Cuomo says, "Okay, I'll go." But since Cuomo decided not to go to the League of Women Voters debates, all the media refused to cover it. You still think these are just journalists and not propagandists? Then comes the sexual harassment scandal and the fact that multiple women are coming out. But remember, the first woman came out in December, and then a smear campaign against her happened. And personnel documents started getting leaked. So, like, this is something that's going to have to be covered by the investigation. And I'm curious what it's going to uncover. Because it's the attacks. Because when she first came out, and then people were coming out, "Oh well, she's a racist," and it's because the personnel documents were personnel records that said several women had complained that she was basically a bully. And it's like, okay, so now all of a sudden, as soon as she says this, documents are leaked and she's being smeared. But what's really amazing is what I've seen from individuals that, like, this is confirmed about the nursing home scandal is clear. It's clear. His own aide admitted to it. In fact, he did a press conference. "Oh yeah, well, but it didn't really impact things." And then you've got the sexual harassment, who originally he says, "Oh yeah, I never said any of that stuff." Then he comes back and says, "Well, I may have said some stuff that was misinterpreted, but I didn't mean it that way. But I'm sorry that people took it that way." And the media still isn't covering him the way they covered Trump. The thing that really gets to me right now is the way certain people, because I've talked to people, I've had conversations with people, and despite all of this, some people are still running with a fantasy. So this guy, Brooklyn Dad Defiant, this is he actually tweeted a conspiracy theory, a ridiculous conspiracy theory, that somehow Trump is behind this whole thing. And I'm like, you can't make this up, because I've heard people tell me this in person. I've talked to people and they're like, yeah, I don't know who Trump is. Like, Trump has no power right now. Not in New York State. Like, how in the world is Trump controlling things that are happening in the New York State government when Trump has no power in New York State? Like, people just make stuff up because they're ridiculous, because it's their team. And when I saw this tweet of this woman, and fortunately she got ratioed, because she needed to get ratioed, because it was absurd what she wrote. Like, this combined with the nursing home issues coming out seems as though Trump is exacting revenge. And so I had to respond, when people are inventing links to Trumps in their mind to justify gross abuses of power by individuals on their team, it's disturbing. Like, it's at this point, it's not even just Trump derangement syndrome. It's like it's completely and utterly delusional. And like I said, also these allegations were leveled as early as December. But that's where we're at. People are still trying to run around and run cover despite the absurdity of this guy being raised as a hero. And it's like, in some cases, so in cases like the Brooklyn Dad, that dude is a paid shill. He's a paid shill. He's paid by some PAC to tweet. Well, he's paid by a PAC. And so his tweets seem to be along the lines of what he's paid to do. Cool. But there's some people, like I said, these regular people I'm talking to, like, either they're just gullible or they are internally creating these because they don't want to accept and acknowledge that they were lied to and that they believed the lie so wholeheartedly. So in the case of people that watch the media and listen to them craft this narrative about Andrew Cuomo being some great hero, so there's a saying: it's easier to convince a person of a lie than to convince them that they were lied to. And that's what's happening. They were lied to by the media, and they would rather believe that lie than accept that they were lied to. They're continuing to just, delude themselves and pretend as if somehow there's some nefarious plot by Trump to unjustly smear Cuomo. Now, I do think it is interesting that the media that was running so much cover for him is now backing up. I do think it's interesting that certain people feel empowered to come forward. But like I said, the Republicans have no juice in New York. So if anybody, and I'm not saying that these are smears and untrue, I'm saying I think that all that needed was somebody of sufficient power to say, don't worry, I've got your back. Don't worry, you'll be fine. So I don't believe these are lies, and definitely there's a bunch of stuff that's already been admitted. But it does seem to me as if there is some powerful Democrat, who has decided Cuomo's time is up. I have a theory. This is only a theory, and take it as that. It's just a theory. It's for entertainment purposes only. I theorize that Kamala Harris has something to do with this. Sorry, Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has something to do with this. Why Kamala Harris? She doesn't even want to come out? Yes, because she doesn't need to get her hands dirty. She doesn't need to come out and say, oh, Cuomo needs to resign. Effective silence is pretty interesting. Whether you like her or not, Kamala Harris is a very powerful politician, and she's shrewd. You see, Cuomo's star was rising steadily. There was, even before the nominee was secured, there was talk about having him be the presidential candidate. That was an insult to all other presidential candidates that had actually been running, of whom Kamala Harris is one. But once Biden secured the nomination, there was actually talk about him possibly choosing Andrew Cuomo's running mate, but not from him, because he had already committed to choosing a woman or a person of color. In fact, no, he said a woman. It had to be a woman. And it turned out to be a woman of color, Kamala Harris. But Cuomo's power was growing to the point where there was talk about him being named as Biden's AG. I believe that Biden will only be a one-term president, if that. If he even lasts his entire term, I believe he'll only be a one-term president. Not necessarily that the Republicans will take over, but that somebody else, that he will not run for a second term if he makes it to the end of his first. Kamala Harris clearly would then want to be the next person to run for president and be the nominee and the next president of the United States. Andrew Cuomo represented a threat to Kamala Harris's position and de facto as the de facto nominee. Andrew Cuomo's stature and the way he had been built up over the past year was too much of a chance for Kamala Harris to accept. So, my theory is that Kamala Harris, through intermediaries, has sent enough messages to people that they will be covered, perhaps even to a Letitia James, saying, hey, don't worry about coming out with this information. There will be no retribution against you. I got your back. My network, we got your back. Don't worry, you're good. These messages made surrogates, and like I said, I have no inside information about this. I'm just theorizing. Surrogates could have reached out to, because Lindsey Boylan had already said what she said. Surrogates could have reached out to Lindsey Boylan and says, listen, we know you're scared. We know you're worried about retribution. But if you decide to come out with the full story, you will be protected. This is my theory. Because the fact that so much is coming out, that there's an avalanche of information coming out, suggests that his control, that was at one point like just so seemingly ubiquitous, is being interfered with. So what's doing that? It's not Trump, it's not a Republican. It's got to be another Democrat. And my theory is it's Kamala Harris. Thanks for checking out this episode. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.